Bruce, you must have something really good too.
Of course I do. It's Bruce Danielson, and I guess I'm here to entertain you too.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our special city council meeting on Wednesday, April 1. Seems like we just did this yesterday, didn't we? So thanks for making time again, council, to come back. And this will be just a few opening remarks. We'll get into the agenda. Just with the noticing of and 5-day notices between readings and trying to time all this. It's a little bit of a go rodeo right now to figure out on the meeting. So I'll thank the clerk's office for, keeping us honest with the noticing and so forth, but especially thank the council because you guys, I know, are having to adjust your lives as well to make this work, which is really appreciated by our residents. So thank you. So we have some joining us on the phone again. We'll go ahead and acknowledge them as we read the roll here. So Tom, go ahead.
Council members Kiley.
Here.
Neitzer.
Here.
Selberg.
Here.
Sale.
Here.
Starr.
Here.
Staley.
Here.
Brecky.
Here.
Erickson.
Here.
All right, we're all here. Let's stand for our Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we'll move on to item 3, which is approving the agenda that we have today, and I look for a motion on that.
Move approval. Second, Sale.
All right, motion by Selberg, seconded by Sale to approve that. Any discussion? All right, we'll take a vote on that.
Council members Kiley.
Yeah.
Neitzer.
Yes.
Selberg.
Yes.
Sale.
Yes.
Starr.
Yes.
Staley.
Yes.
Brecky.
Yes.
Erickson.
Yes.
All right, that item passes 8-0, and that will bring us to the only item on the agenda, item number 4. And I'll invite Jill Franken up to speak to that.
Item 4, first reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, extending the effective date of ordinance number 28-20, adopting the Sioux Falls Board of Health second amended and restated regulations pertaining to the novel coronavirus, COVID-19. The recommendation is to set a date of second reading for Tuesday, April 7th, 2020.
Good afternoon, everyone. Jill Franken, Public Health Director. In addition to talking through the drafted changes to this ordinance, I thought it might be a good idea to give you a little bit of an update. So here we go. I just want to give you a current case count of where we're at with cases first off, and that is that in South Dakota, we're currently at 129 cases. There have been 2 deaths now identified in the state, and 51 have actually recovered. So they're starting to report how many have recovered, which is always that good news piece that people have recovered from this. And so that's something that they're starting to report on their website as well. Current cases in Minnehaha and Lincoln County, we currently have 40 cases in Minnehaha County. We actually had 9 new positives today. So bringing that up to 40 cases. And then current cases in Lincoln County is 11. We had 6 new cases in Lincoln County today. So we have a total of 51 cases in Lincoln and Minnehaha County. We are also starting to look at across our MSA, so Minnehaha, Lincoln County, Turner, McCook, and there's a couple of additional cases to look at us from an MSA perspective, and I'll explain why we're doing that a little bit later. So we have 54 cases in the total MSA currently as of today. So data that I want to share with you next is information and data that we're going to start using to drive some of our public health actions or recommended actions. And so I want you to know that Albert on our team has been just doing a fantastic job of helping us to, as well as TJ Nelson have been doing a great job in the EOC in helping us look at some data sets that we can start looking at some benchmarking from. So the first thing we did when we started looking at data was select some peer communities We looked at communities that have population densities similar to Sioux Falls in our MSA. They have similar ages and income ranges as to us as well. So some of the comparison cities that we're looking at are Fargo, North Dakota, Omaha, Lincoln, Nebraska, Tallahassee, Florida, Des Moines, Iowa, Colorado Springs, and Dayton, Ohio. So we're getting kind of a nice cross-section, or not just pure cities around us regionally, but in a couple of other key areas across the country. So using the number of cases identified in our comparison cities, we also then decided it's time for us to start looking per capita. And so how many cases per capita do we have in our MSA versus these other peer communities? And so that's the first thing we did as well when we started looking at benchmarking. You have to have some way to compare. So then we also are looking at the date of the first confirmed case of each of these peer communities, by which there are more than just the ones I mentioned, but those are the most notable. And then we also we're looking at dates in which mitigation efforts are being implemented. So similar to what you're all regarding on almost a weekly basis, we're looking at what those other communities are doing and how they have taken policy actions to impact the spread of COVID in their communities. And so things such as emergency declarations that have been issued, school closures, public gathering, size limitations, curfews, stay-at-home orders, and other mitigations. Certainly some of these might be happening at the state level, but some of them are happening at the community level as well. But regardless, they are impacting those communities. So just to give you kind of an example now of how our per capita is rating across some of these communities, based on current data, so based on data from March 31st, Sioux Falls MSA, we're at 14.68 cases per capita. Okay, that's as of March 31st. I'm going to give you a notable here, though. Today, we went up to 20.33 because of those rather remarkable increases, that 9 and...
Per 100,000.
Yes, per 100,000. Yep, per 100,000. So this is, now I'm talking per capita. So this is cases per 100,000. So thank you, Mayor. So again, as of yesterday, we were at 14.68. Fargo, North Dakota was at 15.07. Omaha was at 13.53. And Tallahassee was at 7.27. Interesting, huh? They're very low, and so we're kind of interested in what's going on in Tallahassee, Florida. We also are watching them because their first case happened within a day or so of our first case, so we're following real closely the kind of actions that they're taking and how come they're seeing such tremendous, decrease in their case volume. So some of the things that they have taken, if you look at Tallahassee specifically, is 2 days before they even saw their first case, the state declared a state of emergency. And that was before Tallahassee's first case, like I said, 2 days before. They also limited public gatherings on day one. So day one that they saw their first case, they started limiting public gatherings. They closed schools on day 6. They limited business and no alcohol sales. How interesting is that? They actually limited alcohol sales starting on day 7 of the spread in their community. They closed city buildings on day 13, so they were a little farther along than, in their cases than we were when we closed our buildings. And they had stay-at-home ordinance or curfew issued on day 14. So stay-at-home ordinance, curfew they issued again on day 14. So this is really fresh data, so I really can't even get into answering a lot of detailed questions about this because real time, those guys are working on still collecting more and more information and data. But the point that I'm trying to make to you all is that we're trying to utilize data in another way, not just looking at cases that we have and how are we going to do whatever is being done across our state, but how are we looking at other communities and what they're doing and try and draw some conclusions from that to say, could we take certain actions, and when should we be taking those to be able to make a difference? So additionally, we're also awaiting information from the health systems. And just so you know, Dr. Jen Tingley, our Chief Medical Officer, is here today. Next week, when you have second reading of this ordinance, Dr. Mike Wilde and Dr. Mike Elliott will be here, if not in person, by phone. So we've already talked through them being here for second reading. So, but what they are working on that we're going to get information on real soon here, yet this week, is some really more definitive information regarding when we think we're going to surge in South Dakota, and also some particulars about when we think we're going to surge in Sioux Falls. And so that's information too that we'll be looking at. So when are we going to start seeing cases increase? And when, remember that, I see a look of question on your face, Councillor. So it's when are we going to see, where we keep talking about flattening the curve, when is that curve going to start happening? And so that will also help us to know when we need to make any possibly additional recommendations to you as a city councilor, to this community, for perhaps either staying the course or doing additional mitigation efforts. So those are some things we're working on right now, and hopefully I'll have more for you on Tuesday that can give us some more definitive time frames of when we think, which could possibly lead us, this ordinance today that you're regarding to approve, to go towards second reading, actually extends what you approved about a week and a half ago. Does that sound right? Not even a week and a half ago? A little over? Not a week ago. Not a week ago. It was last Thursday. So it will actually extend that 2 weeks to April 22nd, I believe it is. That's what we're recommending for this current existing ordinance. But it is possible that we could be bringing an amendment to that ordinance based on those factors of data and information that I'm sharing with you, as well as our real case increases that we may see over the coming days. So that's just some information for you. Hopefully that's helpful. And as we have more and can build that information out more, we'll be sharing that with you as well.
All right, thank you, Jill. Anyone from the public here to speak on this this afternoon? All right. Councilors, we can move into any questions you might have for Jill on this, and I'll start with Councilor Selberg and then Councilor Staley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just so we're clear, and people that are watching or that are out there wondering why we're meeting today, to sum it up or simplify it, just so I've got it straight too, we're today kind of arming ourselves, because action that we take has to have at least 2 readings. So if there's a step that has to be taken at a moment's notice, and the first reading has to be 5 days out, and I'm speaking this out so people out there that are listening aren't quite sure, and if I'm wrong, please correct me. But today we need to kind of put something kind of in the holster to go, well, if by next Monday or Tuesday it's time to step it up in one way or the other, then we're ready to go at that time. We make the second reading there and go forward and we're ready to go. Is that correct?
Well, I would leave it to Attorney Koistra to say from a legal perspective, but I think you did a pretty good job summing up from, my layman's perspective, how, what that means. Do you have anything that you'd want to add to that?
Yeah, I would add, what we're doing is providing as much notice and due process as we can. We have an emergency city ordinance that allows for immediate efficacy of ordinances, but there's in the state law in the first and second reading, we're providing as much notice as we can to the public.
And it has something to do with the fact that, and not to get into all kinds of political whatever, but things in Pure, if they'd have gone different a little bit on Monday, a vote or two, then this step wouldn't have necessarily been necessary. We could have just moved into, I'm not trying to overcomplicate this, but am I on the right road again?
Yeah, what was presented to the legislature was a proposed statute, a bill, that would allow for waiving of the second reading and effectively just effective upon one reading.
Okay.
So that was the discussion that was had in the vote that occurred on Monday.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the information again today on what we're doing, because again, sometimes with the data changing daily, and it is, who knows where today we're not quite ready, and 2 days we could be, and by Tuesday that seems like a lifetime away the way things are going. So anyway, thank you for the update. Appreciate it.
Councilor Staley?
Yes, Jill, I think what you're seeing on my face is concern and pondering of what you're taking this in. I saw your press conference this morning. You did a very good job. And I appreciate how you're approaching these issues coming from cities that have been successful. You gave 3 points this morning, and you just told them to us again. That what I got from this morning is that we need to be alert that these could be coming next week. The amendments. Number 1, a curfew. Number 2, the stay-at-home order. And number 3, business closures. And this morning at the press conference, we also heard our city attorney, Stacy Koistra, saying that we do have some police power. I can't remember exactly how you said it, but you were talking about at what point would the police force kick in? Remember saying that?
Yes, well, there's a difference between police power and police force.
Police force meaning our police personnel.
Sorry.
At some point, you were saying that there's a question as to at what we have that ability, it's just what would be the trigger for that?
Right, well, and police power is basically the general authority that a city has to control within its city limits. And so that's different than using your police department, if that makes sense.
But can you, what context were you bringing that up for this morning?
I don't know, I mean, that's been discussed in a number of different contexts. This morning I was asked a question by Joe Sneevy as to, that was basically more of a constitutional question, but it does relate to the different levels of government. And when we look at it from a city point of view and what powers we have, you know, that's what we're discussing, is to what extent do we have that police power.
And so, you know, I think it's beneficial that you brought that up this morning because it's out there, it's in the media. I posted something on Facebook about it, and I think that's going to be a good preparatory discussion for people. And of course, it's just so divisive because we've got the business community and individuals who think hands off on the government, and then these other people who are saying we need to do whatever we need to do to keep us safe. My question is, have we heard of communities where they really don't have a surge? Because, I mean, we're talking about, and I understand what you're talking about by flattening the curve, but is there a possibility that we are not going to really, that we could just keep it kind of flatlined if we take the right precautions? Or is that surge just a given that is happening with this?
Certainly every community has a different impact, but we're going to know more a year from now about what types of actions made a difference. I don't think I can tell you right now that there's a community that is flat yet, because there are also going to be resurges. It's not going to be just one peak and surge. You're going to see that happen 2 or maybe even 3 times in communities where it re-emerges more than just one time. Because not everybody's going to get exposed the first time to coronavirus. And so it's quite possible that there will be a resurge of that. So it's way too early for me to tell you that there's any community right now. However, that's what we're doing, is trying to look at where communities are at least having some success early, albeit, but are maybe having some success, and what do we need to glean from that as actions that we should be recommending to you that are in the policy realm of what we need to be doing. Of course, there's all kinds of actions. We're talking every single day about that. Is just individual responsibility to socially isolate and be able to do your part to mitigate the spread of coronavirus. And so, you know, certainly every community is going to be a little different in how much they decide as a community they're going to do that, right? Individual responsibility. But that truly is, I'm sure many of you heard the COVID task force at the federal level yesterday talk about how important that's going to be through this month of April to be extremely vigilant so that we can avoid that peak and that surge from going too high and causing more deaths than we would want to have in our country. And so that translates to the community level as well.
And if I may, sheltering at home or staying at home order, does that still allow someone to go out to the grocery store? Can you kind of give some details, if that would get to that point? What's allowable for someone to travel outside their home?
Well, so there's...
Can I,
yes,
can I just
please.
make one point of order?
Thank you.
Is that the agenda item is to set a second date of reading for this. So beginning to talk about curfews, shelter in place is not what we're discussing.
Except she did discuss it. She did a presentation to give us some information on it. So we are...
She's addressing this ordinance. We're not talking about shelter in place or curfew ordinances or anything like that.
Right, but she gave us a presentation, she gave us some, this is kind of a combination informational and...
I'm going to let Stacy address this because this is the direction I've been given to chair the meeting.
Yeah, we have to stick with, this is merely an agenda item, moving this from first to second reading. She provided some courtesy information, but when you're talking about substance, you've got notice requirements and things you have to do. And there isn't anything being presented, there isn't anything on any agenda regarding any of those topics. And so for today, the agenda is limited to whether or not this proposal should go to second reading next week. And then all those topics can be discussed within the bounds of that agenda, but that's not where we are.
I understand. Well, so I will just request that what I just asked about the sheltering in place, just as a general piece of information across the country, how that looks for people being able to leave their homes. Okay, if you could get that back to me.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Starr.
I would make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Do you want to unpack why you want to adjourn before we take action?
Well, if we're not going to have an open discussion about what we're trying to do and consider this and setting second reading, we might as well go home. We've gotten the information from the press conference. We've got what we need. We're not going to be able to ask any questions moving into the future. You know, it just came across the news report that Florida's doing a shelter in place right out of Tallahassee. You know, I believe I have questions that follow along that where are we going next? What can we do?
All right, we'll take a vote on that, and I'm going to do a roll call vote on the motion to adjourn.
Council members Kiley,
No.
Nitzert,
No.
Selberg,
No.
Sale,
No.
Starr,
Yes.
Staley,
Yes.
Brecky,
No.
Erickson.
No.
All right, let's get back to the business at hand. Is there other questions for Jill on this? If not, I'd entertain a motion to set a date of second reading for Tuesday, April 7.
Move approval.
Move to approve.
All right, motion by Selberg, seconded by Kiley on that. Any discussion, council? All right, all those in, well, actually, let's take a roll on
Well,
that.
excuse me, Mayor?
Yep, you're on.
Mayor? I am really confused. When do we get to ask the questions that we need to prepare ourselves? You know, I mean, I'm trying to watch the press conferences, you know, trying to do all these things while staying in place. But you're telling me today I can't even find out what shelter in place means and understand all of these things in a deeper, more, you know, way so I can contemplate them for a week before we have to make this final decision. And again, I've talked about bringing the public along with us. Why can't we bring the public along with us today? Why cannot we begin those discussions before we have to make a decision on them on Tuesday? Why are we doing this way? I do not understand the curtailing of the discussion of this meeting. I don't understand what you're doing. And if it's coming from the city attorney, please explain it to me, why we can't have the broader discussion. I thought that was what we were going to begin to do today, because I've got lots of questions and I want lots of information, you know, before I start making these decisions. And, you know, I'm confounded is what I am.
I'm passing the gavel because I want to speak to this as well. We have not noticed.
Thank you.
We have not noticed anything regarding curfews or shelter in place. So we can't discuss that because we haven't noticed that. And I know you understand that, Counselor. What we have noticed is simply an extension of the ordinance that you approved 2 weeks ago.
Mayor, whoever's dogs are barking, can we please have someone mute their phone? I can't hear you. If you could please start over. And if we could have our phones muted, I can't hear anything.
Sure. Counselors on the phone, if you could mute your phones, please. So we haven't noticed, nor are we at a point where we're taking any action on curfew or shelter in place. It could be that we would call a meeting tomorrow on curfew, let's say, a special meeting, if that's something that we had to give 5 days notice on in order to act on then next week. If that was noticed, then we would have a conversation on that. All your questions could be asked. But what we have noticed is simply the ordinance that was read into record that just extends what was already approved 2 weeks ago. So we can't even amend this. We can't bring an amendment next week to the meeting that would add shelter in place or curfew to this, because that would be a substantive change that would not be allowable under law. So we would have to renotice that issue. You need to understand that when the legislature made the decision they did this week, it put us in this 5-day cycle of having to notice and have 2 meetings on things. So what we're trying to do is operate within the bounds of the law that has been passed down from the legislature, provide proper notice and due process, and still allow the council to get as much information as they can. So what we could do is, if a curfew or shelter in place option is being considered by the administration, that would be noticed, because we'd have to vote on that. We'd have a first reading on that, and we would start to have, I'm sure, a lot of conversation around that. And I would dare bet that may be something that we'll be looking at very soon. But to Jill's point, we'll have some data, probably by tomorrow even, that would tell us if and when that metric is at the point where we need to consider that action. It's not being considered today. It's not on the agenda today. And that's why we're proceeding just to move this ordinance to second reading is all.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I only brought it up because I thought at the press conference this morning that I heard our Director Franken saying that there could be some amendments to this next week. Okay, so that to me sounded like it was on the second reading that there would be some amendments, and that's when I heard her talk about these different options.
There could be amendments potentially, but not substantive like that would really alter the ordinance. We'd have to renotice that. So there could be some minor amendments to this, like maybe extending the date from the 22nd to the 30th or within those parameters. But things like that would be more substantive in nature. And even he's growling at me saying the 22nd to the 30th. So even that he feels would be substantive enough that wouldn't be an acceptable amendment.
So thank you for that clarification, because to me, if I would have had to vote next week for these 3 options, I would have wanted some time to digest what those actually were before they were presented.
Absolutely.
As that amendment, and to have that discussion publicly before we voted on it. So that's what I heard this morning. Yep. So there must have been miscommunication there.
And I can tell you, if I can just say one more thing, we haven't even as an administration talked about this. We haven't even sat down and had a conversation about shelter in place or curfew or what that would look like in our city. Not to say we're caught on our heels, but we're so wrapped up right now in responding to what we're already doing with these that we have a meeting tomorrow to talk about what that would look like. So we're definitely not holding anything back or not sharing any information on what options we have at our disposal. We simply don't have that yet. And when we do, obviously a first reading would be brought to you guys, and we'd have a good conversation around that, likely led by Jill.
Yeah, Director Franken.
I think I'd like a chance just to clarify because you're correct, I did say those things, and we are right now trying very hard and as quickly as we possibly can understand how can we be as quick and expedient as we need to be as a community. And so we've been having conversations, especially since the legislature acted and took the votes that they did. It's caused us to now say, okay, what do we need to do to make sure that we do this correctly, but very expediently as we need to. So I may have misunderstood how we could bring something to a first or second reading. It's on me if that was the case. So
Thank you.
Any other counselors have questions? Anybody on the phone? Anybody else? All right, so we're ready to call for a vote?
Council members Kylie,
Yes.
Meitzert,
Yes.
Selberg,
Yes.
Sale,
Yes.
Starr,
Yes.
Staley,
Yes.
Brecky,
Yes.
Erickson.
Yes.
That passes 8-0. Pat, you want to motion us to adjourn now?
Absolutely. I'd move to adjourn.
Thank you. Second on that?
Second.
All right, seconded by Sale. All those in favor say yes?
Yes.
Yes. All those opposed? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you, guys.